What if one of the most iconic love stories of the big screen wasn't finished? What if Vivian and Edward, the unforgettable couple from Pretty Woman, still had more to share with us? For more than 30 years, fans have wondered what happened after that fairy tale ending. And now, whispers of a sequel, Pretty Woman 2, A Second Chance, are sparking hope that the magic might return. But before we dive into what's coming, let's rewind to where it all began and why this movie has never lost its charm. Back in 1990, Hollywood gave the world a romantic comedy that would become more than just a film. Pretty Woman wasn't only a box office hit, it was a cultural moment. Directed by Gere, this story of an unlikely romance between a wealthy businessman and a struggling woman with dreams of a better life touched audiences everywhere. It became one of those rare films that left people quoting lines, replaying scenes, and carrying its magic long after the credits rolled. Julia Roberts, playing Vivian Ward, was the heart of the story. She was witty, charming, and full of energy, but she also carried a vulnerability that made people root for her. Richard Gere, as Edward Lewis, was the perfect opposite. He was calm, reserved, and powerful, yet clearly searching for something more meaningful in life. Together, they created chemistry so believable that audiences couldn't help but fall in love with them. Their pairing was electric, and it set the standard for what we now think of as rom-com magic. The film wasn't just about romance, it was about transformation. Vivian went from being underestimated by society to being seen for her worth and intelligence. Edward, on the other hand, moved from being a man defined by money and deals to someone who discovered love, kindness, and connection. The elevator scene at the end, with Edward climbing up to Vivian's apartment with flowers in hand, became one of the most iconic endings in cinema history. It wasn't just about rescuing the girl, it was about two people rescuing each other. Pretty Woman didn't just win over fans, it changed Hollywood. It grossed nearly $500 million worldwide, making it one of the highest-earning romantic comedies ever. Julia Roberts skyrocketed to stardom, earning a Golden Globe and an Academy Award nomination. For Richard Gere, it cemented his place as a romantic lead. And for Gere, it was proof that heartfelt, character-driven stories could compete with the big action films of the time. But perhaps the most important thing was how it made people feel. It wasn't just another movie, it was an escape, a fantasy, and a story of hope. Viewers saw that love could appear in the most unexpected places, that kindness could change someone's life, and that fairy tales weren't only for children. In fact, for many, Pretty Woman was their modern fairy tale. Over time, the film only grew in reputation. New generations discovered it, streaming it at home, or catching it on television reruns. Its soundtrack, songs like Roy Orbison's Oh Pretty Woman, became forever tied to the story. Even today, the film has a timeless feel. Its fashion, dialogue, and story remain as captivating as they were in 1990. And this is why talk of a sequel feels so powerful. This wasn't just a one-time love story, it was a cultural landmark. People still quote Vivian's lines like, "Big mistake, huge." They still smile at Edward's transformation, and they still wonder, what happened to these two characters after the curtain closed? Did they stay together? Did life pull them apart? Could love, once found, survive the test of time? This backdrop is what makes Pretty Woman 2, A Second Chance, such an exciting possibility. It's not only about reviving a movie, it's about revisiting a story that touched millions, with characters who still live in the hearts of fans. The original film proved that love stories could be funny, messy, and real, while still offering the magic of a fairy tale. The sequel now has the opportunity to build on that legacy. But before we imagine the new chapter, it's important to remember that Pretty Woman wasn't originally meant to be a fairy tale. Early drafts of the script were much darker, focusing on struggle and survival. Yet Gere chose to rewrite it into something brighter, more hopeful, and more romantic. That decision turned it into a classic. The sequel, if handled with the same care, could give audiences another dose of hope in a time when the world might need it most. Looking back, Pretty Woman was more than just a movie. It was a dream wrapped in laughter and heart. It gave Julia Roberts the nickname America's Sweetheart. It redefined Richard Gere's career, and it left a permanent mark on the history of cinema. It's a story we still talk about 3 decades later, and that's why when whispers of a second chance for Vivian and Edward surface, people listen, because deep down, we all want to believe that fairy tales can continue. For years, fans of Pretty Woman have been asking the same question: will there ever be a sequel? Hollywood has revisited many classics, giving beloved characters a second life. We've seen Top Gun return after more than 30 years with Maverick. We've seen Sex and the City reimagined as And Just Like That. Even franchises no one expected to come back, like Bill and Ted, found their way onto the big screen again. So it's only natural that people have wondered if Vivian and Edward might one day step back into our lives. The idea of Pretty Woman 2 has been floating around Hollywood for decades. In fact, after the original film's success, studios toyed with the idea of a continuation. But director Gere often said that the magic of Pretty Woman came from its ending. It wrapped up like a fairy tale, complete and whole. At the time, both Julia Roberts and Richard Gere also felt it was best to leave the story as it was. That decision made sense. The film stood on its own and became iconic because of its simplicity and finality. But times have changed. In today's film world, nostalgia has become powerful. Audiences crave the comfort of familiar characters and stories, especially when they are updated to reflect modern life. And that's where Pretty Woman 2, A Second Chance, comes in. While not officially confirmed by the studios yet, strong rumors and whispers from insiders suggest that plans for a sequel are in motion. The working title, A Second Chance, is already sparking curiosity. The title itself is clever and emotional. It doesn't just suggest a continuation of the story, it suggests a new chapter about redemption, growth and rekindling. In the original film, both Vivian and Edward had a first chance at love, breaking away from the roles society had cast them in. A sequel could explore whether love truly lasts, and how two people who found each other in a whirlwind of magic handle the challenges of life decades later. So what exactly is the buzz saying? Hollywood chatter suggests that producers are exploring a storyline that revisits Vivian and Edward in the present day, years after their fairy tale ending. Life, as we all know, isn't always as perfect as the movies make it seem. Maybe they drifted apart. Maybe they faced challenges that tested their relationship. Or maybe the sequel will explore what happens when you try to rekindle love after time has passed. This idea of second chances fits beautifully into a modern romantic drama, one that audiences today would connect with deeply. Industry insiders also point out that both Julia Roberts and Richard Gere have remained close friends over the years. Their chemistry, even off-screen, has never faded. They reunited on stage during award shows and interviews, often joking about their time on Pretty Woman. That natural connection could be the spark needed to bring them back together on screen. For fans, seeing Roberts and Gere reprise their roles would be nothing short of magical. But the buzz isn't only about the actors. Hollywood is carefully watching how legacy sequels perform. When Top Gun Maverick broke box office records, it proved that audiences are willing to return to stories they loved decades ago, as long as those stories are told with respect and fresh energy. That success sent a clear signal to studios: never underestimate the power of nostalgia. This has only fueled speculation that Pretty Woman 2 might be greenlit as part of this trend. Still, it's important to note that not everyone agrees on whether a sequel is the right move. Some fans worry that continuing the story might ruin the charm of the original. Others, however, are excited at the possibility of seeing Vivian and Edward as older, wiser, and facing the complexities of modern relationships. In a way, the sequel has already achieved something. It has people talking, debating, and remembering why they loved the original in the first place. If the project does move forward, expect it to strike a balance between nostalgia and new storytelling. Hollywood knows that audiences don't just want a repeat of the old. They want something fresh, something that honors the past while reflecting today's world. Themes like midlife love, second chances, and the importance of growth over time are universal. They resonate just as strongly now as they did in 1990, and that's why the buzz around Pretty Woman 2: A Second Chance feels different this time. It's not just an idea being tossed around, it's a concept that fits perfectly into today's film culture. People want stories of hope, resilience, and love that lasts. They want to believe that fairy tales don't end, but continue, even when life gets messy. So while nothing is officially confirmed yet, the excitement is real. News outlets, entertainment blogs, and fans on social media have all been sharing their thoughts and wishes. Every time Julia Roberts or Richard Gere is asked about the possibility, headlines are made. Every hint, every little smile, every vague answer fuels the fire of anticipation. Could Pretty Woman 2 actually happen? The buzz says yes. And if it does, it will not just be a sequel. It will be a chance to revisit characters we've carried in our hearts for decades, and to see them navigate a new chapter of life and love. That is why the possibility of a second chance has fans everywhere waiting with hope and curiosity. When fans hear about Pretty Woman 2: A Second Chance, the first thing they ask is simple: what will the story be about? After all, the original movie ended with a classic fairy tale scene. Edward, the businessman who had always lived by money and rules, climbed up the fire escape to Vivian, roses in hand, ready to fight for love. It was the perfect ending, but as we all know, real life doesn't always stay perfect after the credits roll. That's why a sequel, if done well, has so much potential. One of the most talked about ideas is that the sequel could show us what happened to Vivian and Edward in the decades that followed. Did they truly live happily ever after? Did their love survive the pressures of Edward's business world and Vivian's new life? Or did the differences that once seemed charming eventually become challenges too big to ignore? This kind of storyline could feel both real and relatable. Audiences today often crave honesty in romance. Stories that show not just the beauty of falling in love, but the struggles of keeping love alive. Imagine the movie opening years later. Edward is older, perhaps having stepped back from his empire, realizing that money and power don't mean as much anymore. Vivian, once the girl who dreamed of more, has built a life for herself, maybe in fashion, maybe in charity, or maybe even in business herself. But somewhere along the way, life pulled them in different directions. Maybe they drifted apart. Maybe they lost touch. Or maybe they stayed together, but faced hardships that tested their bond. The idea of them meeting again, with all the history between them, would instantly create powerful drama. The title A Second Chance gives a big clue. It suggests the story won't just be about continuing the romance, but about rediscovering it. The sequel could focus on themes of forgiveness, growth, and starting over, even later in life. It's a message that resonates today more than ever, that love doesn't have an age limit, and that even after mistakes, new beginnings are possible. Another idea being discussed in fan circles is the possibility of a generational storyline. Perhaps Vivian and Edward had children, and the sequel could weave their love story into the backdrop of a new romance involving the next generation. This would allow the film to connect with younger audiences, while still honoring the original characters. Imagine Vivian guiding a daughter who faces her own struggles with love, reflecting on her past and the lessons she learned. Edward, too, could serve as a mentor, offering wisdom from his journey. In this way, Pretty Woman 2 could explore not just love, but family, legacy, and the lessons we pass on. There's also the chance that the sequel could take a slightly different angle, focusing on Vivian as the central character. The first film was about her transformation, her discovery of self-worth, and her journey from being underestimated to being cherished. A sequel could continue that story, showing her as a strong, independent woman who has built her own world and who now faces the choice of letting love back in. This would align perfectly with modern audiences who want to see women portrayed as complete, capable, and powerful, even within love stories. Of course, any sequel would also need to keep the charm, humor, and romance that made the original so beloved. Fans would expect witty exchanges, playful moments, and heartfelt scenes that bring back the magic. The balance would be crucial, staying true to the spirit of Pretty Woman while adding enough depth to make the sequel stand on its own. What would be especially moving is seeing how time has changed both Vivian and Edward. In the original, Edward taught Vivian that she was worthy of more than what society had told her, and Vivian taught Edward that love was worth more than money. In A Second Chance, the roles could evolve. Maybe this time it's Edward who needs saving, from loneliness, regret, or the emptiness of wealth. Maybe it's Vivian who shows him, once again, that life is about connection, not possessions. Or maybe they both find themselves lost in different ways and rediscover who they are through each other. The beauty of this sequel is that it doesn't need to be flashy. It doesn't need big explosions or complicated plots. The magic lies in two characters and their connection. That's what made the original so powerful, and that's what could make the sequel unforgettable. If the writers lean into honesty, vulnerability, and the timeless theme of love's ability to heal, Pretty Woman 2 could strike the perfect balance between nostalgia and freshness. And let's not forget the setting. The original movie gave us the glamorous streets of Beverly Hills, luxury hotels, and high-end fashion stores. A sequel could play with that nostalgia while also showing how much the world has changed. Imagine Vivian returning to Rodeo Drive, not as the outsider who was once dismissed by a sales clerk, but as a woman who owns her own boutique or supports women's businesses. That kind of full-circle moment would give audiences goosebumps. At its heart, Pretty Woman 2, A Second Chance, could be about reminding us that love stories don't end with the first kiss or the ride into the sunset. They continue through life's ups and downs, through struggles and triumphs, through mistakes and forgiveness. And that's exactly why this story has the potential to be even more meaningful today. Because for many of us, the idea of a second chance isn't just a fantasy. It's something we've longed for, something we've lived, or something we hope to find. When fans think about Pretty Woman 2, A Second Chance, the first thing that comes to mind isn't just the story, it's the cast. For many people, Julia Roberts and Richard Gere aren't just actors. They are Vivian and Edward. Their faces, voices, and chemistry defined the original film. That's why the idea of a sequel naturally raises the question, who will return, who might join, and who could bring this new chapter to life behind the camera? Let's start with Julia Roberts. She was only 22 years old when she stepped into the role of Vivian Ward, and it changed her life forever. Her performance wasn't just good, it was unforgettable. She balanced humor, innocence, vulnerability, and strength in a way that made audiences fall in love with her. Critics at the time said she lit up the screen, and they were right. Her smile, her laugh, her energy, it all became iconic. Since then, Roberts has built one of the most impressive careers in Hollywood. She won an Academy Award for Erin Brockovich, starred in hits like Runaway Bride, Ocean's 11, and Eat, Pray, Love, and became known worldwide as America's Sweetheart. But even with all those successes, people still remember her best as Vivian. That role was lightning in a bottle, which is why fans are almost unanimous. If there is a Pretty Woman 2, Julia Roberts has to be in it. Without her, the magic just wouldn't feel the same. The good news is, Roberts has spoken warmly about the original film in interviews. While she's often cautious about sequels, her continued friendship with Richard Gere and her respect for the legacy of Pretty Woman mean there's always a possibility. For Roberts, this wouldn't just be another role, it would be a return to the character that started it all. Then there's Richard Gere. As Edward Lewis, he gave us a businessman who was powerful yet lonely, wealthy yet unfulfilled. Gere brought quiet charm and elegance to the role, creating the perfect contrast to Roberts's lively Vivian. Together they created a chemistry so natural that audiences felt it wasn't just acting, it was real connection. Gere himself has enjoyed a long career, starring in films like Chicago, Primal Fear and Runaway Bride, which interestingly reunited him with Roberts and proved that their on-screen partnership was still golden. Like Roberts, Gere has also spoken fondly of Pretty Woman. In fact, the two actors have remained close friends over the decades, appearing together at events and interviews. Fans often note how comfortable they still seem with each other, as if no time has passed. This bond could be the secret ingredient that makes a sequel work. To see Edward and Vivian again, older, wiser, and with decades of life between them, would be deeply powerful. But what about the rest of the cast? Sadly, Gary Marshall, the beloved director who gave Pretty Woman its heart, passed away in 2016. His absence would certainly be felt. Marshall was known for his warmth, his humor, and his ability to make audiences laugh and cry in the same scene. However, his influence could live on through the sequel. Perhaps a director who admired Marshall's work, someone who grew up inspired by his storytelling, could take the reins. Names like Nancy Meyers, who directed Something's Gotta Give and The Holiday, or even Rob Reiner, known for romantic classics like When Harry Met Sally, could bring the same heart-driven touch to a second chance. Behind the camera, the choice of director and writers will be crucial. The original Pretty Woman worked because it found the perfect balance between fantasy and reality, humor and romance. Whoever takes on the sequel will need to honor that balance while also updating it for today's world. Audiences won't settle for a simple repeat. They'll want depth, maturity, and themes that reflect modern relationships. There's also the exciting question of new cast members. Could younger actors join the story, perhaps playing children, colleagues, or friends of Vivian and Edward? Hollywood is full of rising stars who could bring fresh energy to the film. Someone like Florence Pugh, known for her emotional depth and charm, could be a perfect fit as a daughter or protege. Or perhaps a new male lead could step in as a rival love interest, creating tension and choices for Vivian. These additions would give the sequel more layers, while still keeping Vivian and Edward at the center. And of course, we can't forget the supporting cast. In the original, characters like Kit, Vivian's best friend, and Barney, the kind hotel manager, added heart and humor. A sequel could bring back similar roles, voices of wisdom, comedy, or conflict that round out the story. Even cameo appearances from original cast members would thrill longtime fans and tie the films together beautifully. Music will also play a big role. The original soundtrack gave us unforgettable moments, from Roy Orbison's Oh Pretty Woman to Roxette's It Must Have Been Love. A sequel would need to carefully select songs that create the same emotional pull. Modern artists could blend with classics, creating a soundtrack that bridges generations. After all, music was part of what made Pretty Woman so timeless. In the end, the cast and crew of Pretty Woman 2 will determine its success. With Julia Roberts and Richard Gere, the heart of the story is already there. Add a thoughtful director, a script that respects the original while exploring new ground, and a mix of fresh and familiar faces. And the film could become more than just a sequel. It could be a celebration of love, growth, and second chances. The truth is, fans aren't just hoping for a movie, they're hoping for a reunion. They want to see Vivian's smile again, Edward's quiet charm, and the sparks that fly when they're together. They want to feel the magic that made Pretty Woman a classic, while also being reminded that love stories can evolve, just like we do. And if Hollywood can deliver that, A Second Chance might just live up to its name.